The fire had been raging for hours, tearing through the dry hillside and spilling into the quiet suburban neighborhood like a living, breathing monster. It devoured everything in its path: homes, cars, memories, leaving only smoke and ash in its wake. Paramedic Ethan Monroe wiped the sweat from his brow, his uniform clinging to him in the suffocating heat as he and his partner, Laura Chen, sprinted toward the burning house at the end of the cul-de-sac. They could hear the screams from inside, muffled and desperate. The flames had already swallowed most of the structure, its skeletal remains groaning under the pressure of the inferno. "We need to move now!" Laura shouted, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire and the distant wail of sirens. Ethan kicked in the weakened front door, the heat inside hitting him like a wall. He coughed, his mask struggling to keep up with the thick, acrid smoke. "Fire department!" he called, his flashlight cutting through the haze. "We're here to get you out!" From the corner of the living room, huddled behind an overturned couch, a terrified mother and her two young children clung to each other. Their faces were smeared with soot, their eyes wide with terror. Ethan crouched low, extending his hand. "Come on, we've got you." The mother hesitated, staring at something behind him, her lips trembling. "They won't let us leave," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Ethan felt a shiver crawl down his spine. "There's no one here but us," he said firmly, grabbing the youngest child and lifting her into his arms. Laura ushered the family out the door, and as they made their way to the ambulance, Ethan swore he felt something, like hot breath against the back of his neck. He turned, but all he saw was the raging fire swallowing the house behind him. They sped away, sirens blaring, the ambulance tearing down the winding streets leading back to the main road. Ethan stole a glance in the rearview mirror and felt his stomach drop. The fire was following them. Not spreading normally, no. The flames were racing down the road, leaping from tree to tree with unnatural speed, almost as if it was chasing them. The thick black smoke curled into grotesque shapes, twisting and pulsing, always keeping pace with them. "Laura," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Look behind us." She turned, her face paling. "What the hell? How is it moving so fast?" "I don't know," he said, gripping the wheel tighter. "Just hold on." Ethan pressed the accelerator, the ambulance lurching forward. The family in the back was silent, save for the rhythmic, shallow breathing of the children. The mother clutched them tightly, her eyes fixed on the window, where the fire continued to follow, glowing like an unrelenting predator in the darkness. For a moment, the heat inside the vehicle rose sharply, the air thick and heavy. The radio crackled with static, distorting the dispatcher's voice into an eerie, whispering hum. "We're almost there," Ethan said, more to himself than anyone else. When they finally reached the fire station, Ethan slammed on the brakes, and the ambulance skidded to a halt. The fire that had been chasing them seemed to halt at the edge of the lot, flickering ominously before retreating back into the night. Ethan and Laura unloaded the family, barely speaking, still shaking from what they had seen. The mother didn't say a word, but before she left with the fire department, she looked at Ethan with an unsettling intensity. "They didn't want us to leave," she whispered again. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine. For days after the call, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The fire had been contained, but something lingered. Every night at the station, strange things started happening. Shadows flickering in the corners of their vision, the faint smell of smoke creeping into their gear, the radio crackling with phantom static. Then, one morning, Laura found something that made Ethan's blood run cold. Burnt footprints. They started from the entrance of the fire station and led straight to their ambulance, charred impressions marking the concrete floor. The prints were small, child-sized. Laura's voice shook as she whispered, "Ethan, what the hell is this?" Ethan swallowed hard, staring at the footprints. "I don't know," he said, but deep down, he had a terrible suspicion. That night, he checked the ambulance alone, standing in the dim garage, his heart hammering against his ribs. The lingering smell of fire was stronger now. He ran his fingers along the side of the vehicle and pulled back sharply. His fingertips were coated in ash. A cold whisper echoed through the empty station. "You shouldn't have taken them." Ethan spun around, but there was nothing, just the silent hum of the building around him. Sleep was impossible after that. Every time Ethan closed his eyes, he saw the fire creeping toward them, saw the shadows moving within it. The radio continued to crackle at odd hours, sometimes whispering things just out of comprehension. And the footprints, they never faded. Every morning, new ones appeared, leading closer and closer to the ambulance, as if something, or someone, was still trying to follow them. Laura wanted to report it, but Ethan stopped her. "No one's going to believe us," he said. "Hell, I don't even believe us." But deep down, he knew. The fire hadn't just followed them. It had never really left. 1 week later, Ethan woke in the middle of the night to the scent of burning wood. Sitting upright in his bunk, he looked toward the garage. The ambulance lights were on. He moved slowly, heart thudding against his chest. As he approached, the radio crackled to life on its own. A child's voice whispered through the static. "Take us back!" Ethan's hand shook as he reached for the door handle, his pulse screaming at him to run, to leave, to forget everything. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Some fires, no matter how far you run, always find a way back.